Thank you for that fine expert analysis, Dole. Just one thing, I may be missing something. When was Fresno State added to the Pac-10?
Well, now calm down, Josh. We here at College Gameweek support people with special needs. So, Dole, you keep doing what you're doing. We love you. Live strong.
That's me. That's very mean.
That's all I can see, baby.
Let's move on. Spotlight games we're focusing on this week. Let's turn our attention to Friday night. Finally, after a week of abysmal games in week 2, we have a top 25 matchup in Kansas at South Florida. This is Friday night on ESPN, and Jeremy, a South Florida win in this game might very well put them on the fast track to becoming an 8-0 team as they head to the final 4 games of their season. What do we see in this game?
Well, I think you're very right in that. South Florida, very, very friendly schedule after this game. But I believe when you look at the other side of that, this is a must-win for Kansas. You look at their upcoming schedule, 4 teams in the top 12 out of that conference that are going to be coming out. That's a really tough road to hoe if you don't win this game.
Playing ranked teams was not a theme for Kansas last year. On the road, they did not play a single top 25 team. That changes this Friday. And people want to point to South Florida struggling and going to overtime. They have to beat Central Florida. Central Florida, to me, a very underrated team. And if anything, I think that just gets South Florida all the more ready for this game.
Well, I'd have to agree with you. And when you look at South Florida, where they've come in the past few years, just absolutely phenomenal. But you are playing an experienced Kansas team. You can say what you want to about Kansas' schedule last year. They had a great season. And at the helm of that great season was Todd Reese, the quarterback. You look at what he did this past week, 3 touchdowns, 412 yards against Louisiana Tech. No matter who you're playing, that's an impressive week. And if Reese plays well this week, we could be talking about Kansas actually defeating a ranked team during the regular season.
It's going to be an entertaining game for the fact that you just mentioned solid quarterback play on both teams. You got Matt Brophy at South Florida, and you mentioned Reese at Kansas. Could be a very entertaining and maybe a higher scoring matchup than our friends in Vegas are anticipating.
Well, Pat, you know what I like to say. Tim Tebow wears Matt Brophy pajamas, and that really could come to fruition this weekend.
We all have to embarrass ourselves in one way or another. We shift our attention to the state of California, a fast-rising Fresno State program which, quite frankly, put a beat down on Rutgers in week 1. They're ranked 21 in the country. Wisconsin rolls in at number 10, but some people may be still looking at them as an under-the-radar team, especially in the Big Ten. Fresno State, I mentioned, coming off a huge win at Rutgers. It's going to be a night game on ESPN2. It's going to be a fired-up crowd in Fresno. What do we see happening?
Well, I think a win here for Fresno State is just absolutely huge for that program. You look at the schedule after this, you've got, not too much. You've got UCLA, Boise State, and really that's about it. So Fresno State wins this game, goes through the regular season undefeated. We could be having a very interesting conversation about Fresno State on bowl season.
Tell you look at the Fresno State offense, you think pass happy, and maybe it was a little bit with Jim McElwain, who has since moved on to Alabama, but the stats from the Rutgers game, 216 yards in the air as opposed to 206 on the ground. That's a lot more balance than you would expect coming from Fresno State.
Well, I think that when you look at the key playmaker for this team so far this year, it is at the running back position with Ryan Matthews. You look at 26 carries, 163 yards in that victory last week, and he really becomes the key player and the man to watch on offense for the Bulldogs.
I mean, Wisconsin, not to be overlooked, they trailed Marshall. You may have seen it on the bottom line, depending on what game you were watching last Saturday. They trailed Marshall 14-0 before scoring 51 unanswered to make that a laugher. So it should be a very entertaining game out there.
Well, when you talk about looking ahead, too, you've also got to look at Wisconsin's schedule the next 2 weeks after this game. You've got a very lackluster Michigan team, but they're still Michigan. And then that matchup with Ohio State. So don't catch yourself looking ahead, looking over Fresno State. Could be an embarrassing situation for Wisconsin.
Let's shift our attention down south. South Carolina welcomes number 2 Georgia into Columbia this week. There are a lot of people talking as it relates to Steve Spurrier and maybe job security at South Carolina after his loss. Second year in a row to Vanderbilt last Thursday night. UGA, meanwhile, has outscored the opposition 101-38 in their first 2 games this season. Does South Carolina stand a chance? And where do we see South Carolina as it relates to SEC teams, upper echelon, middle level, or maybe lower echelon?
Well, let's be completely realistic here. Right now in Columbia, you've got just an embarrassing situation with that loss at Vanderbilt. That's a team that you're supposed to be when you're a good team in the SEC. Tommy Beecher, Chris Smelley, you've got the quarterback controversy there. You've just got a program that is not looking very promising. And really, when you look at this matchup with the talent that Georgia has, this should be an absolute blowout. But But you look at last year, South Carolina defeats Georgia in what most people look at as the key loss for the Bulldogs last year. And as much as you might want to downplay Spurrier's presence, he's still the on-ball coach. He's going to have a game plan. He's not going to tip his hat this week before. And this could be a better game. When you look at Georgia's schedule after this is a run of Arizona State, Alabama, Tennessee, Vandy, LSU, Florida, Kentucky, Auburn, Georgia Tech. All right. I mean, when you go through that schedule, there's not many breaks right there, Josh. So you really got to say this is the first test. Could be more interesting than we think up in Columbia.
You mentioned the loss last year. Georgia always seems to find a way to lose one of those games that they're supposed to win. They're great in the big-time games. Mark Richt's team, however, has struggled to the South Carolinas and Vanderbilts of the world. 16-12 loss last year. Do we see a low-scoring game this year?
I don't think we do. I think with those two offenses, with the way that Georgia's playing right now, with Matthew Stafford, no shot Moreno, just absolutely unbelievable running back. South Carolina's going to have to score to stick in this game. I think we're looking at maybe not a ridiculously high-scoring game, but the offenses should be impressive this week.
I think we see a low-scoring game. And you mentioned Noshawn Moreno. He put on his own highlight reel against Central Michigan this past week. Before we get to more highlight games, we're going to send it off to Dole once again, who has moved away from the Moneymaker studio and is now ready to offer his Friends of the Week from Week 1 and Week 2. Let's send it to Dole.
Hey there, friends. I'm doing my Friends of the Week this week and for Week 1. Week 1, I like Mark Ingram. He is a friggin' beast. He ended up running all over them Clemson Tigers. Just ask him. And then for Week 2, I pretty much like Ryan Matthews. He had 26 carries for 163 yards and 3 touchdowns. See, those are my Friends of the Week. And see, here, I can do what I want, and I hand out penalties. Come with me, I'll show you something. That guy right there? He picked Jacksonville State over Georgia Tech. We don't do those kinds of things. And you know what the penalty is for knowing those kinds of things? We shave that beard right on off, friends. Right back to y'all, guys.